All right, let me know if this one cuts out. That's frustrating when you spend all that money on mics and they're cutting out. So I will call her. I know it is Mike's fault. Way to go, Mike. um, so I thought that was really interesting that on this one spot where the ocean floor comes up, and it's about a 10-mile wide path in the ocean. We found a lot of parts of chariots that are laying on the ocean floor. Now, wood doesn't last for thousands of years. When it's underwater, it just deteriorates. But coral reefs will grow around wood, and then as the wood gets destroyed, those coral reefs remain. So we have quite a significant number of coral reefs that are shaped. They're round, and then there will be a vertical shaft, and then they're round on top. And there's such consistency between these coral reefs that, the theory is, and I think it's a pretty solid theory, that those are definitely wheels and axles to chariots. I have what Jeff Miller calls Jimmy eye. So my eyes are like magnets for stuff, and I have Jimmy eye right now. Something is in my eye, and it's been bugging me for like 2 days now. So yeah, if you see me like digging in my eye, yeah, it's my finger. So what's fascinating too is that we have one wheel that's still intact. So the wood is disintegrated, but it was laden with gold, and it's a 4-spoke wheel, which was really specific to that time period in Egypt. And we have inscriptions that show these 4-spoke chariots. So there was a small period of time, which coincides roughly with the time of the Exodus, the time that Moses was alive, that's on that shelf, on that path where they found all the other chariot parts. So I think that's incredible. I think it's fascinating. I'm not willing to say 100% that that's definitely where they crossed, but I think there's, if I were to pick a place between that and the other place that I showed you in the Suez Canal, I would pick the ocean. I would pick the spot where they found all the chariot parts. Now we're going to back up, and I wasn't planning on talking about the 10 plagues, but there's something in very recent news. I'm going to rip my eye out. There's something in very recent news that caught my attention, and no, it's not the coronavirus. It was something else, and I think I'm going to go on a little bit of a soapbox right now. I think it's horrific that all the attention right now is on the coronavirus, which is don't get me wrong, it's a horrific virus, and I would never downplay that. I think people who get sick with it get really, really ill. It's like 2%, roughly 2% of the people who get sick with it die. We have like 60-some cases that are confirmed in the United States, and like it's this pandemic, and everybody needs to freak out and live in caves, and yeah, 1 death in the United States. The flu kills 100 times more than that. So anyway, that's my little soapbox. There's a bigger, really big epidemic going on right now, and you guys probably have not heard about it. I've not heard about it, and I only heard about it because I was searching. Do you know what it is? Yeah, locust. Yeah. East Africa is absolutely, like, completely devastated. The amount of people who are going to starve to death because of this plague of locusts is unreal. The amount of economic damage, unbelievable. So I'm going to show you an article in a little bit. These plagues are really not anything new. So these biblical plagues of biblical proportions have been around since before the Exodus. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So one of this magnitude, if you didn't hear that, one of this magnitude, it's been 2,200 years since one this size has been recorded. Where is it in the news? You're not hearing it. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to read a little bit of an article in a little bit, but we don't have, because of the 10 plagues in. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to pose a small question.
Uh huh.
When you read something about a nature event like the locusts,
Yeah.
do you ever think to yourself, the Lord is angry with them?
Do I ever think the Lord is angry with them when I see these natural disasters? I always want to be extremely careful. Um, do I ever think that? Do I ever entertain that thought? Yes. Would I ever stay with confidence that God is causing these natural disasters because of evil? I'm not confident saying that, because they've been around since the beginning of time. And if you know anything about the creation account, I wrote a research paper on the creation account that says it's a big long title, and I don't even remember. It's been like 20 years since I wrote that paper, but it was something like the creation account. Is it science? Man, I can't even remember the title. Is it science? Is it basically defrocking other myths that were active at the time, or what? I mean, that's not even close to the title. I totally butchered that, but I remember the content of that paper. I spent a lot of time on that paper, and what I discovered is that the creation account in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 doesn't spend a lot of time really getting technical with scientific terms, though they had the terminology. They had incredible terminology where they could have laid this out in a very scientific way and just spelled all this stuff out. The Genesis account doesn't do that. The Genesis account really, the purpose of it is to counter some of the ancient myths, mythological creation accounts that were out there at the time, and to demonstrate that there is only one God. There's one God of the cosmos, and he's all-powerful, he's almighty, and that the world is full of chaos, and that the God of the cosmos, the God of the universe, is not a God of chaos, but he's a God of order. So God takes things that are chaotic, and he creates order out of that. And the creation account is a prime example. He takes all this stuff that's just chaotic, and by chaotic I don't mean faulty, but there's just chaos in the cosmos. God created just things for infinity, and then he pulls that all together in this perfect, incredible design that cannot be by chance. It's impossible. It's a mathematical impossibility. So though there is a lot of science behind that, that's not really what the Hebrews were interested in. They were interested in laying out this really powerful picture of God who brings order to the world. And then as you go through, our theme for this year is revival. And as you go through these stories, you realize that everywhere where there's chaos, God comes in, he reaches in, and he restores that stuff. God revives people from the dead. God heals the sick. God takes storms that do happen, which are natural disasters. It's chaos. And God restores that. He brings people together to rebuild. All the stuff that happened in Jerusalem. You have the Assyrians who came in and the Babylonians who came in, and they just annihilated not only Jerusalem, but most of Israel. And look at what Ezra and Nehemiah did, because of God. They came in and they brought order, and they brought order out of chaos and destruction. That's who God is. So, I'm hesitant, though we do see God punish people in different ways. I'm hesitant to say, every disaster we have is because the people are bad and God is punishing them, because we have countries that are just absolutely evil to their core, where they're doing really well. Economically, they don't have natural disasters like other countries have. Christianity right now in Africa is far wider spread than anywhere else in the world. Africa is a Christian continent. It's a Christian nation, absolutely, hands down, far more than the United States. They're having plagues that are just, I mean, the locusts aren't the only issue that they're facing right now. Are you going to say something? Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we would. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 God sends rain on the poor, on the right. Yeah, the just and the unjust. Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. And Habakkuk. I mean, Habakkuk's complaint is, there are all these unrighteous people, and, they're killing and slaughtering people, and they're doing really well. They're healthy, they're happy, all is good with them. That was Habakkuk's complaint. Yeah, yeah. Sure. Well, I think biblically, what you see more often than not is where, they pray to God to open up the heavens and to send rain, and things like that. Like, it's not like, God, why have you caused all this? What have we done? You don't find that. You find them instead saying, okay, we recognize, it hasn't rained for 3 years. God, we come to the throne of you, and we throw ourselves down, and we're at your mercy. You find that really often throughout Scripture. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, very well put. One of the reasons I wanted to go back and kind of focus on the plagues, we don't have evidence, except I will say this is pretty cool. So Ramses, the pharaoh in Egypt, who was the pharaoh at the time, we think was the pharaoh at the time of the Exodus, had, you ready for this, Victor? He had 100 kids. A lot. A lot of wives, a lot of kids. But we do have, in 1995, we discovered that Ramses' oldest son, out of the 100 kids that he had, passed away. There was this mysterious, just got sick and died. There is evidence of that. We have inscriptions. We know that to be fact. So I think that's really interesting. That, to my knowledge, is the only evidence that we have of these plagues. One of the reasons we don't get evidence is because, especially the pagan governments didn't write about when they were waylaid and knocked out flat. They write about their successes, right? In the annals of the kings in antiquity, what they did is they celebrated their successes, and they really boasted about them to show how powerful and mighty they were. This was a really, really tragic black eye for the Egyptians. So I wanted to kind of point out that these plagues, and kind of tying into Matt's question, these plagues clearly came from God. I don't think any of us would argue that God sent these plagues. God says he sent these plagues. God sent these plagues to punish the Egyptian people. So does it happen? Absolutely it happens. Is that the norm for God? I don't see that to be the case in Scripture. But you also have to understand that God is a God of order, not a God of chaos, and that the oppression that the Israelites faced at the hands of the Egyptians was really unprecedented, horrific oppression. We know that God hates oppression, that Jesus' mission that he lays out as he reads from Isaiah in Luke chapter 4, when he stands up and he reads from the scroll of Isaiah, it's about what? It's about restoring justice to the oppressed. It's about freeing and setting at liberty those who are oppressed, feeding the poor. You find this throughout the Bible from cover to cover, taking care of the poor, feeding the poor, clothing the naked, freeing the oppressed. And this is not a passive, like, I'm just going to pray for you. That's kind of the American way in a lot of respects. We pray for people and step back and say, oh, isn't that a shame that all this stuff is going on? Well, the God of the Bible is the God of order, and Jesus himself was on mission. Jesus went in and flipped tables over, and he actually liberated the poor and healed the sick. And he didn't just do that to prove that he was the Son of God. He did that because that is God. That's God's heart from cover to cover in the Bible. So yeah, absolutely, God has punished people. This was an extreme case of oppression. It also was a way to bless people who God had already had a covenant with. God, starting with Abraham, said that he was going to bless these people. God holds true to his promises. God will not break his covenant. I also wanted to show that these plagues were heavy. I think a lot of times we read it and we try to memorize, right, in order what the 10 plagues were. And like I've seen that done where we're like, okay, what were the 10 plagues? And we try to memorize them in order. Nothing wrong with that. But I think in just doing that, we miss the magnitude and the sadness that these people felt. Not just the Egyptians, but the Israelites as well. And there were Israelite casualties in this process. And I'll show from the scriptures that was the case. I think there were a lot of Israelites who died, who didn't take Moses's and Aaron's warnings seriously, and they were killed. They were swept up in these plagues. And we find also with the 10th plague that God says, if you don't, anybody who doesn't have this blood painted over their door frames, I will take their firstborn son. Regardless of whether they're Egyptian or Israelite, they must do this to spare their firstborn son. I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect there were Israelites who didn't do it. So anyway, I want to show kind of the magnitude of this, but these 10 plagues, part of the thing is why? Why would God send these plagues, and why in the order that he did? If you look at the first 2 plagues, the first one was the water that was turned to blood. It was poisoned. And then the second was the plague of the frogs. I watched an interesting video of a rabbi where he was talking about this, and he said, in warfare, the first two acts of warfare in antiquity are what? The first one is you poison the water, or you stop up the water supply. Remember Hezekiah, who dug this tunnel 150 feet below the ground? Why did he do that? Well, he did that because when the Assyrians came in, they were stopping up the water supply. They hemmed the Israelites into the city and wouldn't let them out of the wall. They surrounded the whole wall in the city of Jerusalem, and they plugged up their water supply. That's the first act of war. You cut off the water supply. How long do people live without water? Not long. Yeah. How long typically? You're a retired nurse. How long can people live without water? 7 days. So, yeah, stop up the water supply, poison the water supply, and people are wiped out. Incidentally, these plagues lasted a week. So I think God brought these people, he poisoned the water supply, which was a really strong indication that this is an act of war, that you guys really need to pay attention, that Moses and Aaron aren't playing around, and neither is their God. And then the second one, the second act of war after they've stopped up or poisoned the water supply is they create noise and confusion. They start blowing their trumpets all over the place, and they just create this mass hysteria and this mass confusion. And then, the troops are trying to assemble and figure out where the threat's coming from, and they don't know. Because you have all these trumpeters who are blowing these trumpets around the city, and it's very strategic. So the frogs, if you look at the plague of this, it's really interesting. Chapter 8 of Exodus. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will plague all your country with frogs. The Nile shall swarm with frogs that shall come up into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and in the houses of your servants and your people and into your ovens and your kneading bowls.'" Now, why is this important? Especially in order. What was the first plague? Poisoning the water supply. What was the second plague? These frogs, which are noisy. They're loud. They're obnoxious. One bullfrog outside of our window has bolted me awake, and I am a deep, deep sleeper. And you're like, is that in our bedroom? Is it under the bed? Is it in the yard? Is it on the deck? And I've actually walked out into the yard in the middle of the night before to try to hunt these dumb things to shut them up. And you find out, nope, they're in this little tiny stream, Parson Run, that runs behind my house. It's just a little tiny runoff stream, and they're down in the water where they belong. But the noise is crazy. Yeah. You can't think. Yep, that's right. Yeah. But, it's interesting, too, that it mentions it's in the kneading troughs and it's in the ovens. Well, why is that important? What are they cutting off? They're cutting off the food supply. Sure. So, this is, very strategic on the part of God, and I think we overlook this because we just don't think about it. We just read it, and like I said, we memorize them in order. So then you have the gnats. Have you guys ever had gnats? There's a reason why they're called bugs. They bug you. They get in your gnats are the most annoying thing. They get in your eyes, like Jimmy eye times 10. Have you ever had a gnat fly into your eye? Oh my goodness. It is nasty. You're so punny. Yep, yeah, breathe them. You ever get one that gets lodged in the back of your throat? Oh, my goodness. Now imagine gnats everywhere for a week. All right, followed by these first two plagues. And then you have flies followed by that. You ever have flies? thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. I've never seen thousands of them, but I've had a couple of them. Talk about, the psychological part of it. You ever have one in the hall light that you have to keep on for the kids in the middle of the night, and they get inside the glass globe, and you hear, it's not just the buzzing wings, but then it's the bing, 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 bing. And you're like, you want to murder that thing, but you can't, right? You can't kill these dumb things. Try to catch one with your bare hands. You can't do it. We do have a fly shooter from Cabela's, incidentally. That's not a plug for it, but they do work, and they're fun. Okay, then you have the livestock that die. All of them. Just the Egyptian livestock. Why is that important? Why is livestock important? Yeah, food. Not just because you can eat them, but because how do you get your produce? Yeah, travel, plowing fields, food, clothing. What's that? Fertilizer. Yeah, absolutely. All of them gone, wiped out. Can you imagine the smell? You ever try to move a 2,000-pound cow? You ever see them, and you're talking hot climate? You're talking bloated, nasty cattle, sheep. Well, probably not sheep, because the Egyptians really didn't like sheep herders. But you have all this livestock everywhere. Everywhere you can look, you see all these dead animals everywhere. I just can't even begin to imagine. It gets ripe really quickly. So then that's followed by yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yep. People are hopping mad. So then you get the boils, the painful boils. That infected all of Egypt. Do you ever have anything, a pain, even if it's a dull pain that just keeps you up at night? You can't go to sleep. Anyone? Ever have an itching in different areas that keep you? Yeah, I know. Now I do. That keep you awake, right? You can't go to sleep. These painful boils are excruciating. These people aren't getting much sleep. And then you have hail. What's interesting about this, I'm going to read chapter 9 of Exodus, verse 19. Now, therefore, get your livestock and all that you have in the field into safe shelter. He's talking to the Israelites, not the Egyptians. Get all your livestock and all that you have in the field to safe shelter, for every man and beast that is in the field and is not brought home will die when the hail falls on them. What size is this hail? It's massive. This isn't the little tiny, even golf ball size hail that we get here. These are massive. This is a huge, massive hailstorm that's killing people if you're out in the open. I have in Arkansas. Yep. I drove school bus, and I had students who brought me pictures of, we had this hailstorm that came out of nowhere, and they had softball-sized hail that went through their roof. It was putting holes through the roofs of their house. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. Not up here, down in the south. He's full of them today. Then whoever feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh hurried his slaves and his livestock into the houses, but whoever did not pay attention to the word of the Lord left his slaves and his livestock in the field. All right, people died. Probably a pretty significant number of people died. The hail struck down everything that was in the field and all In all the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and the hail struck down every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, was there no hail. That plague was followed by locusts. What the hail didn't take, the locusts did. Locusts alone are absolutely destructive, and we'll end on this because we're pushing the clock here. Chapter 10, verse 5, and they shall cover the face of the land so that no one can see the land. And they shall eat what is left to you after the hail, and they shall eat every tree of yours that grows in the field. And they shall fill your houses and the houses of all your servants and of all the Egyptians, as neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen from the day they came on this earth to this day. Then he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Now, here's what I wanted to show you guys. This was written 3 days ago, February 27th. This is not old news. This is happening right now. Running out of time, East Africa faces new locust threat. Countries in East Africa are racing against time to prevent new swarms of locusts wreaking havoc with crops and livelihoods after the worst infestation in generations. A lack of expertise in controlling the pests is not their only problem. Kenya temporarily ran out of pesticides. Ethiopia needs more planes, and Somalia and Yemen, torn by civil war, can't guarantee exterminator safety. Locust swarms have been recorded in the region since the biblical times, but unusual weather patterns exacerbated by climate change have created ideal conditions for the insect numbers to surge, scientists say. Warmer seas are creating more rain, weakening dormant eggs, and cyclones that disperse the swarms are getting stronger and more frequent. In Ethiopia, the locusts have reached the fertile Rift Valley farmland and stripped grazing grounds in Kenya and Somalia. Swarms can travel up to 150 kilometers a day and contain between 40 to 80 million locusts per square kilometer. If left unchecked, the number of locusts in East Africa could explode 400-fold by June. That would devastate harvest in a region with more than 19 million hungry people, the UN Food and Agricultural Organization has warned. Uganda has deployed the military. Kenya has trained hundreds of youth cadets to spray. Lacking pesticides, some security forces in Somalia have shot anti-craft guns at swarms darkening the skies. Everyone is racing the reins except in March. The next generation of larvae is already wriggling from the ground just as farmers plant their seeds. The second wave is coming. On and on and on. Here's a picture. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. This is happening right now. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to end with this sentence because we're absolutely out of time. But after that, they take to the air in swarms so dense they forced aircraft to divert. A single square swarm can eat as much food in a day as 35,000 people. In one day, one swarm, you have multiple swarms of these locusts in East Africa right now. In one day, they eat as much as 35,000 people. Do you understand how many people are going to die because of this? Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is the pandemic right now. This is happening right now. So I look for millions of people to die because of this, just this plague of locusts. So the weight of this, the gravity of this, is absolutely crazy. And when you look at the scriptures, I hope that we reread the Exodus in a different light, because this was catastrophic for these people. All right, we're out of time. We're going to stop there, and we'll pick up in a little bit. Thank you, guys.